Aloha and welcome to Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking with Chef Daniel Swift at Windward Community College's Uala Leaf Cafe. I'm Noreen Ogawa, AARP Hawaii volunteer in Pearl City. We have enjoyed Chef Daniel's inspiring presentations, and I am excited to share that this series has been extended into December. Today, we'll be learning how to make whole grain risotto. The recipe was attached to your confirmation email. Please join us in cooking along with Chef Daniel or try the recipe later on your own. Our sponsors are Windward Community College, Kaunoa Senior Services on Maui, and AARP Hawaii. AARP is a membership organization for people 50 years and older, but what we do for everyone. Our goal is to empower people to live independent, fulfilling lives. We currently have many interesting activities planned, so please be sure to check out the AARP website for more information about this series and others. AARP hopes that each of these activities will engage and inspire you as you maintain your healthy and active lifestyle. This is a picture of what you should be seeing at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Everyone is currently on mute. If you wish to submit a question to Chef Daniel, please click on the button that says Q&A. Type in your question and press enter. Jackie Boland, AARP Hawaii Community Outreach Director, will be monitoring the questions and making sure they get to the chef. Most of the questions will be addressed after the session. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may type your questions in the comments. We won't be using the raise hand command, nor will we be using the chat command. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Chef Daniel Swift. Mahalo, Chef Daniel, for generously sharing your creative talents and for your inspiring contributions to this series.
Hi everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Noreen. I appreciate it very much. Welcome back to Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking, brought to you by Windward Community College and AARP. So this evening we're going through the recipe I hope that everybody got, and it's a twist on the classic risotto using whole grains. And I wanted to kind of go through the ingredients with you first, if I could, and share some insights into different brands and things that you might find at the supermarket. Previously, you used to be able to go to the bulk section and get whatever grains you wanted individually and or create your own mix. Currently now we're not finding those bins self-accessible, so you have to kind of rely on the blends that are out there, but you can also get a couple of different varieties and create your own if that's what you want to do. So one brand that I recommend is Bob's Red Mill. They've got a number of prepackaged mixed grains and even legumes. This particular one's a 13-bean soup mix. I'm not using that particular one this evening, but I've used that in the past. Here's a veggie soup mix. This is one that we're using this evening. We've got a nice multi-grain wild rice blend from Lundberg, which we use at home quite often. And then this is my wife's favorite. This is a sprouted brown rice, whole multi-grain mix that you can pick up at Safeway and some of the other local supermarkets, Whole Foods. But there's no limit to the number of brands that are out there in that regard. And then I also added in a little bit of the green rice, the bamboo rice they call it. So it's bamboo extract and regular short grain rice to add a little bit of flavor. It's got a really nice subtle flavor to it. The thing you want to think about with the grains is, for this particular recipe, we're soaking them. That just basically expedites the process a little bit. You could probably do most of the grains that we're using just as you would with arborio rice for traditional risotto and go straight and dry. You want that starch. But in this case, like I said, I'm soaking it. So where the recipe calls for 2 cups, which is what this amount is. And if you can see, I soaked this one already, and this is the amount of expansion and absorption that you will get from the 2 cups. After you've done that, it's really important that you then drain it in a strainer, and I lay it out on a towel to absorb any extra moisture, because as we go into the pan with the hot oil, we don't want to add any water to that and create a fire or splatter. So make sure that it's nice and dry. So it has soaked, it's been hydrated, but it doesn't have the excess moisture pooled up around the bottom. So this is the one that we'll use here in a few moments. Beyond that, we have the vegetables and the different ingredients. Usually always for me, a little bit of garlic in the beginning and some onions. That's traditionally used with most risottos. I also put on the recipe some red peppers. The herb that I'm using is just a straight chopped parsley. I've got butter here because at the end we'll mount it with a little bit of butter, but you could also use something like Smart Balance or just the straight olive oil. This is an avocado olive oil blend, actually. That's sort of up to you. So if you're watching your fat intake, watching your cholesterol, just use the fat that you're comfortable with and that works for you best. Flavor obviously does come through with the fats, but there's a lot of versatility and a lot of flexibility there. Likewise with the Parmesan cheese at the end, if you're trying to stay away from cheese, that's something that could be omitted. You could use a cheese substitute if you're staying away from dairy or if you're lactose intolerant. The mushrooms that I have, I'll show you how to slice them or what I'm doing in terms of slicing them here in a minute. But I got some cremini and I got some white button mushrooms. I looked at shiitakes, but they were last night at the store $16 a pound or $15.99, which is crazy to me for mushrooms. The other thing that I have here is some dehydrated shiitakes that we kept in the kitchen. So I just took the hard dehydrated mushroom, soaked it in some hot water, and that would give me the shiitake mushrooms that I was looking for. So I'm just going to use the fresh ones today, but I wanted to show you that. And then also mention that the stock that you would get from soaking the dry is ideal for the dish that we're making tonight. So feel free to get creative and do whatever it is that you'd like, or whatever your taste
Dan.
preferences are. Yeah.
Speaking of creative, Carla Rogers would like to know, could you use oatmeal to make risotto?
Yeah, absolutely. The blend that we have here has some oats in it. So we've got barley, we've got oats, I've got some split peas, we've got white rice, bamboo rice, brown rice. There's like 3 or 4 different kinds of rice. The wild rice blend, quinoa, amaranth, a bunch of different blends mixed into that. So there really is no limit to what you can use for this particular process. So the key at the end is just to make sure that you cook it to the doneness that you like. Hawaii's a little bit different. Risotto's not that popular. Oftentimes I think it's because the rice is, it's undercooked, it's al dente. It's crisp to the bite. And most people in Hawaii want their rice soft. So any grain, barley, oats, whole grain, cracked will work fine. Just make sure you cook it to the doneness that you're looking for. Great question, Carla. Okay, so I've got my stock over here. I just brought that to a boil so it'd be nice and hot. You don't want to take cold stock and add it to the pan, because part of the process is to make sure that we are cooking the rice. And if you have to go and you're cooling it down every time you add liquid, then it's going to take a little bit longer to recover and longer to cook. So you'll see this is steaming a little bit. This is my vegetable stock. I just use some vegetable base. You can buy canned vegetable stock. You could even use water if you wanted to. You're probably getting enough flavor in there already. So I'm going to hit it with a little bit of the oil to start with. And traditionally it's done in a pan that's like this, not deep and broad, that allows the vegetables and the rice and the grains to spread out and cook and absorb evenly. If you were to do it in a deep pot, the stock that you slowly add would just hit the bottom and it wouldn't cook the entire dish. So you'll see that here in a second. So I'm going to add these grains. I'll just fold this towel up and transfer it over. Shake it out. And then I can move on to the vegetables. You want to be careful because this will be hot. Like I said, As long as all of that liquid is out, if you do the soaking process, you should be fine. I'm going to give that a couple of minutes and move to the couple of vegetables that I need to cut here. So I've got the cremini, or the darker mushrooms. I've already sliced some just because in interest of time. But I wanted to show you sort of the technique that I use. Normally you'll remove the stem. A lot of people use this in another recipe, duxelle and some of the other classic dishes that would go in. If it's a really short stem like this, oftentimes, honestly, I'll just leave that. So they can tend to get a little fibrous the longer they get. So if it's right up to the base, then I can tend to leave that in there. Likewise with the button mushroom, some people will just cut the stem off right at the base of the mushroom and then use it that way. The recipe calls for slicing it, but that's up to you. You may want to quarter them or half them. It depends on the size of the mushroom. And in this case, I'm going to just cut them in half, and then I'll just do some slices. This one's a little bit smaller, but I'm going to keep the slices roughly the same. In half, and then cut those slices. And if I were doing the dried shiitake, it would be the same sort of thing. There is one item on here that I added because I was at the store and it looked beautiful, with some Swiss chard. So I grabbed a bunch of that. It's an organic one. So last week we used kale, Swiss chard. I mean, just be as creative as you want and add any type of vegetable that you'd like. I'm going to throw in the onions here and the garlic really quick while this cooks. And I tend to keep an eye on it as well. I think I have enough oil in here, but if you find that it looks dry and you're not getting the browning that you want, then feel free to then come back and add a little touch more oil. The zucchini, I'm just going to split and quarter it. I've already cut the ends off. And if I've quartered it, then I can just line it up like this. And again, if you're going with a vegetarian version like this, you might want to cut these a little bit larger so it provides that sort of substantial mouthfeel when you're eating your dish. I'm going to go a little bit bigger, kind of bite-sized pieces. And this was a larger zucchini, but it was the smallest one I could find last night. But that should give us a nice sort of bite-sized piece. Give this a little stir here really quick. And then feel free if you have questions to let us know. We try to answer them as we go. And this smells really good. I'm starting to get that aroma come through from the garlic and the onions. Now I can add the peppers, the mushrooms. And because the mushrooms, the Swiss chard, because the mushrooms absorb a lot of liquid initially and then release the liquid, I'm going to hit them just with a touch more oil right over the top of those mushrooms. A little bit of salt and pepper. And any seasoning that you wish to add, feel free to do it. We're just keeping this sort of neutral and simple tonight. But you'll have the garlic and the flavor of the vegetables coming through. The zucchini. And it can become a really nice and colorful dish. Once these zucchinis get in there, I'll set aside the parsley, the lemon and the Parmesan for later, and give this a stir. I'm going to turn it up on high now that we're starting to add the liquid. So I would reserve like fresh herbs for the end, but if you did want to throw in a sprig of thyme, a sprig of rosemary, or something that would cook in there to release the flavor and then remove at the end, you could also, of course, do that.
Dan, this is Jackie. I do have one question. Somebody's asking, they'd like to make this dish with farro, and do you know places where it can be bought on the island?
Absolutely. Nice and loud. Did they ask where to get it?
Farro, yeah.
Oh, farro. You should be able to find that at Whole Foods. I didn't see it. We went to Times and Safeway here in Kaneohe yesterday, and I did not see it. But the shelves were a little bit bare in the grain department. I'm not sure why. but you should be able to find it at Whole Foods or Down to Earth.
Thank you. And I have a question for you. You're adding all these vegetables pretty early. Are we worried about them getting soggy at all?
Not really. And this dish is in a way sort of similar to what we did last week with the braise. They are going to tenderize, and what we recommend, or what I try to recommend to you guys as we go through this series, is to think about what it is you'd like to see in the final product. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with throwing in any of those vegetables in the last minute or last couple of minutes and staging it to your preference. So you're controlling it with the heat for one, and you're also controlling it with the size that you cut the vegetable into. So, you know, as you experiment in the kitchen and you play around, you can start to figure out what works best for you in the final product. So the zucchini will hold up great. Last week we used Brussels sprouts. Those would be good in here, but they take a little bit longer. Cauliflower would take a little bit longer. But, you know, a snap pea or something that's simple right at the very end would turn out great. So then I just give this a stir. And what we normally do as you're cooking risotto, you can see there's still some liquid here, and we're allowing it to absorb the liquid that we've added. And then once it's absorbed, we add more liquid, and we just continue that process. So it's a little bit different than like a pilaf, where you would basically use the onion, or brown the onions, brown the rice, throw in a bay leaf or sometimes a sachet or a sprig of parsley, and then you pour in all of the stock and you cover it and you put it in the oven or you turn it on low. So here we want to try to absorb as much of that liquid as possible before we add the second batch.
So one of our participants noted that different grains have different cooking times for al dente. So do you just eat as you go along, or how do you know when it's going to be at the right point if you don't use the same grain all the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would, like for this one, the split peas that are in here, there's some lentils, some split peas, and some yellow split peas. Those will probably be on the softer side than your long grain wild rice, right? So for the batch that I made, as long as you're soaking it in advance, you're really shortening the process in cooking, and you'll just have to experiment a little bit. So what I would recommend is that you just make sure that you're taking the grain that takes the longest and doing the test. I don't know that you would need to like cook them separately, but you just have to sort of make sure that you soak them and then pull the one out that would be the hardest grain to work with and use that as your guide. And this looks like it's ready for some more stock. I could also add a lid to this for a couple minutes and then take it off. But because we're working in a pretty short window of time, I'm going to just leave it open. And then you can start to get the aromas from the garlic, even the vegetable stock. It's really nice. So this is what I mean when I said you want to make sure that that stock is hot. If I had this at room temperature with the air conditioning on nice and chilled, you're adding it would just suck the heat out. So you'll notice as I add it, it continues to boil. It doesn't really skip a beat. It works out great. But this is a dish that takes a lot of care, and a classic risotto, you know, it might take 20, 30 minutes. I'm trying to expedite it tonight just in the interest of time, but it is something that you sort of watch and you're really mindful to make sure that it comes out the way you want and the rice is exactly the doneness that you're looking for. I'm going to leave that on high. I'm going to add a touch more stock. And then I want to show you really quick, if I could, a dessert. I put on the original concept for this. We were trying to do multiple recipes, but 30 minutes is a little tight. But I did have written down this is, multigrains can be used for any number of things. not just dinner, not just risotto style stuff. So I just cooked up the wild rice blend with a little bit of sticky rice and a little bit of brown rice, and let that cook in just straight water. I didn't add any sugar or anything else. I could have put a slice of ginger in there or something for flavor, but I wanted to make like a dessert. The bamboo rice works great for that, but if you're looking for the full multi-whole grain experience, you'd want to cut that with maybe even some quinoa or your favorite rice, other than the straight up bamboo rice. So this is just the cooked rice. And then what I've done, I got some yogurt. I've got some, this is ice cream that I just took out of the freezer and melted. So basically makes almost like a creme anglaise sauce. You could take fat-free ice cream, gluten-free ice cream, whatever brand you're using, and make sure that the dish remains relatively healthy. This is a yogurt, and then I have the orange segment. So I'm going to just add the orange juice from the orange. I'm going to save a couple for garnish. I'm going to pour in the anglaise. A little bit of the yogurt. And I have a bit of honey here, a little amber honey. So if I was looking to sweeten it up a little bit, depending on the yogurt you're using or the ice cream, just a little touch of that. A little chopped mint in here would be really good as well. We don't use a lot of nuts in the kitchen. As a matter of fact, we don't use any. This is a nut allergy-free kitchen, so we don't have that, but that would be really great in here. Some cashews or something like that would turn out really nice. And you're almost making like a porridge, a sweet porridge. And the flavoring that you do would be totally up to you. You could get as creative as you want. So if you're doing multigrain rice separately, you can, and you have leftover, you can utilize it for, use it for a dessert just as easy as you could use it for a carbohydrate. And then if you're serving it individually, this bowl is probably a little big for an individual serving, but.
Are you using Greek yogurt for that, Dan?
Yeah, that's a Greek yogurt.
And then we have two other questions when you're ready for them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ross is asking, is the heat still on high for the risotto? Like, is that what you're supposed to do, is keep it at that high temperature the whole time?
At home, medium high. This is a little higher than I would like, and we don't normally cook with these burners. So medium high, depending on your range at home. You don't need it boiling quite as rapidly as this, but I just, you know, we're coming up on 25 minutes and we try to wrap everything up in 30, which is a little bit fast for what we're doing, but I would go a little bit lower than it is here currently. I'm just trying to make sure that it gets done.
And are you adding about 2 ladlefuls of liquid at a time?
Yeah, and this is a 6-ounce ladle.
Oh, thank you.
But you could go a little bit less. I mean, some people can get real zen. There may be folks that are Italian or traditional Italian chefs or cooks that, you know, it's almost a love affair when you approach this. It's one of those things that to do it traditionally and to do it in the proper technique that made it such a timeless classic. It's not something that would be rushed, kind of like we're doing tonight. You know, you wouldn't soak it, you wouldn't boil it as quite as rapidly as we're doing. It's part of the experience. It's part of the adventure, part of the love that goes into it. But this is
can you clarify, I think you said it earlier, but when do you know when to add more liquid?
When most of it has dissipated. So you can see most of this is starting to disappear. I'm going to do a little quick taste on that and see where we're at. But it should be pretty close to being ready. And then I just put a garnish of mint on that. So that's easy to serve like that. And then the grains that I just tried were pretty close. And you'll notice here, I'm trying to get one of these wild rice grains. Those are the ones that will take the longest in this mix that I created. So I could even pick that out if I wanted to and try it. And it's done enough, so I can tell it's done enough. And it's up to you. If you wanted a little more, more wet, you could add a little more stock. I'm going to leave it as it is. Set this aside. And now I can reduce the heat just a little bit. And then come back to my other ingredients. So I still have my herbs, my butter, which is starting to melt because it was next to the pot. And that will melt down and create, you know, a creamy texture in the multigrain risotto, as will the cheese. So I'm going to put the butter in. And again, if you wanted to use Smart Balance or just use straight olive oil, feel free to do that. Whatever your preference is in that regard. A little bit of Parmesan or other cheese. Just grated, fresh grated Parmesan would be nice. This is actually, we only stock like the Kraft kind, the already grated Parmesan. But if you have a really good high quality Parmesan fresh at the end, it makes a huge difference. A little bit of the parsley. And then I'm going to take, I add a little bit of the lemon zest before I add some lemon juice. Just a couple strokes of that on here. Just to give it that fresh citrus flavor. And then you always, if you're using zest, you want to make sure that you take it off before you cut it and start taking the juice out. Then I can just cut half of a lemon, catch the seeds. And I'm going to go about half of that. And now I just really need to stir this together. You can see we kept a lot of the color still in the vegetable. So it still looks nice and fresh. That was relatively quick. And I'll try to get it so you can see as that butter melts, it actually thickens it up. And we still have some of the starch from the grains. And you can see the sauce that's running down, it's thickened. Probably about what we call a light nappe in the kitchen. So we want to make sure that we just stir that around. You'll always do a final seasoning check. Good. Maybe just a touch more salt. In there. And then you just need your serving dish. And what we'll normally here, we'll just do family style. So I have a larger platter. And most of these recipes I set for about 4 people. So it's kind of up to you, depending on your portion size. And then I can just pour this off. Into the serving platter. And I've got a couple sprigs of parsley here. I just wanted to garnish it on top. And then what I would normally do as well is come back then and hit it with just a little parm. If you're using the parm. And if you wanted to, you could do a little bit of lemon zest. And then I'll show you why it's easier to do when it's whole, because when it's cut in half, it tends to roll out of your hand a little bit more easily. But this will add the aroma and the fragrance of the citrus when you put it on the table. And that should be served generally right away. Just serve that as is. It will absorb that liquid and take on most of the flavor from that broth. So it works really well, especially fresh, but it can be reheated, and if it dries out, you can add a little bit more stock or a little bit of water to heat it up. Yeah. Yep. I didn't know if there's any questions.
There are a couple questions. So Sandra would like to know, did you make your own vegetable stock, or if not, where do you get it, or how did you obtain it?
Sorry. We know during regular times we would be making our own vegetable stock. This one was just the bouillon. We have the paste that makes vegetable stock. We're not open currently, so we're not moving a lot of product, and we're not making the stock from scratch. But you can buy it in a can, you can buy it in the cartons, you can get the bouillon cubes. It doesn't even need to be vegetable stock. This could be curry or whatever your favorite paste base is for dishes. You could make this a curry dish. It's really the technique that we want to make sure that folks are aware of. So, you know, again, with the soaking and the cooking, you can check the grain to make sure that it's cooked the way you want it, and then get as creative as you can with the different items that you put in. And it certainly could be chicken or pork or some other meat protein.
Thank you. And Sophie wants to know, if you soak the grains overnight, is that too much? Is it going to make them soggy?
They should not get soggy. If you're putting just tap water in there, most all of your grains and your carbohydrates need to go to about 195 degrees before they get cooked all the way. So they're not going to turn to mush sitting overnight. You need a minimum of probably 2 hours depending on the grain, but you could certainly go overnight and it wouldn't hurt it.
Great. And Allison says, when I cook, I constantly want to stir the food while it's cooking. How can I prevent myself from stirring the rice while it's cooking?
Well, with this rice, you have to stir it. So this is the perfect dish for you. Stirring it and getting into it. And we didn't add to this one other traditional item, which is wine. A lot of times before you add the stock and start going with that liquid, you'll do some wine. So if you imagine what this would turn out like if I would have put a little bit of wine in the beginning, would have added some another layer of complexity and flavor. And even if you were to go with the red wine, especially with these dark grains, it would make a really nice finished product. So just get creative, and you know, it's okay to stir most things. You don't have to worry about it.
And then Kit is asking, when you're done, are the grains crunchy?
Well, like the wild rice grains are always going to have a little bit of a bite to it. What I would recommend is that you just cook it to the doneness that you want. Certain grains like wild rice, barley, will always have a little bit of a bite to them. They don't ever really get to the point where they turn to mush. Brown rice even still tends to keep a little bit of texture to it. So if you do not like that at all, then just find a selection of grains that you do like. Quinoa would be good, it softens up. The multiple different varieties of rice would work, but stay away probably from the wild rice blends, the cracked oats, the barley, and things like that.
And then Jolene, I would just want you to clarify when you would add the wine to the rice.
Before the stock. So as you're sauteing the grains and in our case the olive oil and avocado oil with the garlic and onions, that is when you would add it.
Okay, and then Susan is asking our obligatory Instant Pot question. Can you adapt this for Instant Pot?
I think the commercial says you can use an Instant Pot for anything. They probably have a risotto button. I've used one, but I use it as a pressure cooker. I'm assuming that's the same thing. But I would go to YouTube, you know. I can't imagine why you wouldn't be able to. The one that we have has a saute button on it. And that's basically what we were doing here. So we were bottom heat and lid off, fat, garlic, grains, cooking it. There's no reason you couldn't do it. The thing that I would say is what I kind of mentioned in the beginning. Yeah, you have to be careful that it's not, you don't get too deep with the grains, because then you'll have a hard time doing the technique that we sort of went over this evening. But it doesn't mean it's wrong. You probably just dump everything in at the same time, or all of your stock, and then let it cook until it's the doneness that you want.
And then Nancy is saying she loves to add pumpkin seeds to grains for the crunch. When's the best time to add them to a risotto?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, even if they're toasted and seasoned on top would be wonderful. I would say at any stage. It just depends on what you're looking for in terms of the texture. If you really like the crunch, of the toasted seasoned pumpkin seeds right at the end would be great. But in the beginning, they would hold their, they'd still have some texture to them if we put them in with the grains in the start.
Great. And I don't see any more questions from participants. But somebody is asking if you're willing to share your email address.
Yeah, of course. It's Dan Swift at hawaii.edu. I think they'll put it in the chat. Feel free to reach out. I mean, it's a real pleasure for us to be able to, partner with AARP and in this stressful sort of time, reach out to the community and provide a service that is simple and fun and a focus of what most people are doing today. And, we're here to serve. So call, email, just let us know what it is that you need. And if you have ideas for other courses, I think we're pretty well set for the end of this calendar year, more or less. But we do hope to continue it on into next year, and maybe even bring in other folks. You probably get tired of listening to me, but we want to make sure that we're providing a service to the community we love.
And we did get one more question, Dan. Can raisins be added to risotto?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So that's a great question, and I like the questions like that, the questions about stirring. One of the things that Jackie and I thought about when we came to bring this programming to the public is to make sure that we're kind of educating people about technique and then allowing them to be as creative as they want in terms of ingredients. Like I said, this could be a beef, chicken, seafood, pork dish just as easily as it can be a vegetarian dish. This could be a lot leaner, a lot healthier, depending on the ice cream that you use or the yogurt that you use. We want you to feel sort of unbounded. A lot of times when you're doing classical cooking or when you're learning to cook, it can be somewhat intimidating. But if you spend a little bit of time understanding heat transfer and understanding techniques between moist heat and dry heat, and then your ingredients, the sky is the limit. You can do anything you want. And that's what we're really hoping that folks can get out of this series.
And with that, I'll just mention I've sent to everybody the links to the new Thursday series. And so if you didn't get it, please feel free to go to aarp.org/hi. We have the full list up there. But we'll be doing the cooking methods and then following that with the 5 multicultural dishes. So if you didn't get it, I'll probably be sending it out in reminders, but a lot of folks on the webinar are coming in different ways. So aarp.org/hi. And then I do want to let you know that tonight's random number winners were Faye Chase, Nancy Alejo, and Magda Ziram. And we're getting smarter, so we know how to contact them now. And for those of you who have won in the past, those finally did go out in the mail, and I appreciate your patience in waiting on your prizes. So mahalo, everyone. Oops, it looks like we do have one more question. Tammy says she's only seen Chef Ramsay make risotto, and it looks plain. What's that about?
Traditional risotto, I'm not going to say it's plain, but it generally is onions, butter, oil, the arborio rice, maybe some garlic, the wine, and stock. And then they finish it, depending on how you want, usually with the cheese and the butter. Some people will put a little bit of cream. But I think what maybe makes it look plain is the fact that most all of those items and all of those ingredients are in the same color spectrum. Onions, garlic, white rice, white stock, butter, it's all the same color. So what really comes through is the flavor and the fact that it's an incredibly delicious item. But if you were to use red wine, for example, instead of the white wine that's traditionally used in a risotto, it would throw up the color a little bit. You may throw in a little bit of herb at the end. It's sort of up to you, but he's probably sticking to the classically trained style of making risotto. So, which is great. I don't want him to come and knock it. Well, actually I do. If he's watching, then come on down, Gordon. We'll put him on for a night. But a lot of times it's just sticking with the classics and mastering those before they allow people to move forward with creativity. So I tend to start on the other end of the spectrum. Get creative while you're learning classical techniques.
Great. And I just have one more thing. We've gotten so many questions about the video recordings of the sessions. And thanks to Chef's lovely wife, Alice, I now know how to retrieve all those videos. So first of all, if you're on Facebook, just put in the search at AARP Hawaii, and you can view them on our Facebook page under videos. But otherwise, what I'll do is I'll go back to the landing page you registered on, which was, you know, Cook 2020 HTTPS. I'll send it out to you guys, and I'll just embed it on the landing page so you can watch it from there. But thank you for your patience as we learn this new technology. Okay, so I think we're done. Dan, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Mahalo, everyone.
Enjoy your weekend.